Thank you very much, Minister Inder Singh.
Muchas gracias, señor ministro.
Available on the conference website. I would next like to invite Mr. Salvador Perez of the Ministry of Finance of Mexico for his presentation. Mr. Perez.
Muy buenos días. Bueno, pues en el contexto de la experiencia mexicana,
Mexican experience, I would like to present to you what has to do with public investment policies and the Mexican experience. First of all, I'd like to mention to you that within the context, the most important context within the legal framework that we have is the general law for civil protection, where it is established that the risk analysis is a cross-sectional topic that has to be analyzed by the civil society, governments, and private associations. And within this context, I would highlight the item which has to do with the fact that it is mandatory to conduct a risk analysis and before we make any public investment related to construction, building, human settlements, etc. And in this regard, the law itself does provide for the mandatory aspect that is penalized if this analysis is not carried out, any activity that doesn't comply with this. And so this risk analysis in the last few years in Mexico, we have worked so that these analyses contain important elements such as the databases of infrastructure and also of the risk maps and threat maps to have an appropriate conjunction with the decision-making process, having all of these elements, the composition of the land and of the cities, and also consolidating something important, which is probability analysis that doesn't only have the geographic or orographic conditions, but also loss scenarios, potential loss scenarios, that everything has to do with hydraulic infrastructure, and the probability analysis has been an important tool up until now. And then we have a more specific framework that has to do with all of these public investment projects, and within this context, we have a series of guidelines, very specific ones that have for any kinds of projects. We're discussing investment projects, and especially from the different stages, from planning in origin of the project, the cost benefit, which is very important to determine effectiveness or the benefit that this public investment can generate in any project, to the stage that has to do with following up profitability of the investment that has been authorized for infrastructure or any other kind of investment. As an important, relevant aspect, within this framework, we have very specific provisions to have all sorts of public and private associations, which is within this legal framework and guidelines. It is important for authorization, and which, depending on which associations are ad hoc or are convenient, to be authorized. And so these social profitability analyses are taken into account. And this is the full framework that contains certain guidelines with a certain order within the context of the risk analysis itself that has to be made in order to have the projects authorized. And so public investment is contemplated, and this is the public-private association element that is very important. And now we'll see in the next few frames, you'll see the instruments or specific programs through which the federal government is carrying out public investment policies. One of the main instruments that the federal government has available and applies is the Fund for Disaster Prevention. This is a financial instrument that allocates resources to promote projects that are oriented towards actions and works that are going to reduce risk. This fund allocates funds to support not only federal entities but also local entities to develop all kinds of projects, amongst which you have the realization of risk reducing and risk analysis in design or early warning systems, and also where the part where we are linked now, which is public investment. There is a possibility to have works that will mitigate the impact, the disaster impact, and there is a macro project that is a lot more. Whenever the cases of a macro project. That entails other things, but in this case, these are smaller projects, and this is how we focus, and where works for mitigation or reduction of impact are very important, and those are the hydrometeorology projects. Another thing is to promote the culture of prevention and self-protection by the people, by the population. So that is why we finance or we fund projects that have to do with this promotion of culture for prevention, and any other initiative that will be for the benefit of social benefit. Another program that has been very successful in Mexico, and considering that Mexico has one of the main risks to which it is exposed, and as a consequence, I would say, rather, that Mexico has the possibility, the exposure to both hurricanes on the Atlantic side, but also on the Pacific side, but the final effect are the floods that Mexico suffers. So this topic of flooding is a very imminent risk in general. So we are focusing towards the infrastructure and hydraulic infrastructure that will enable to mitigate the effect of the disasters. And so in that particular case, there is a special program that is called for protection of population centers. And so funds are allocated annually, and within the context that I was showing you in the beginning, after an appropriate analysis and identifying the areas that need to be benefited with certain protection or protective works for the benefit of the population, especially hydraulic nature. The Water Commission, which is the highest entity in the government, within the government, is the entity that is in charge of executing these kinds of works and projects. Another program that is also very important in Mexico, it's a program that has been constituted since 2008, and this is the Tabasco Plan, which is related to the flood risk, and we defined the realization of a specific project and that are going to be protecting and channeling the waters, so that whenever the event of a flood takes place, not just for populations but also production centers or places where you're farming, they can be the farmlands and all that can be protected. And this has been a program that has been in place since 2008, and between 2008 and 2009 there was a big investment in infrastructure works to control rivers, to protect the river banks, and the results were very good. And so in 2010, when we had another event, a similar event to the one that happened in 2007, and thanks to the mitigation actions for the population, this program has been kept in the last few years, and each year it does receive funds by the entity that is responsible for this can execute a series of mitigation actions, and I was saying especially for floods. And even though certain programs or instruments of investment instruments become very important cornerstones for protecting population, ever since yesterday's inauguration, as Ms. Wallström was explaining, even if we're trying to reduce risks, it is not necessarily completely possible to have on all fronts a risk reduction, as has been already said here. And that's the reason why in the following chart here, I want to show you how part of the resources that the Mexican government does invest related to risk management is done. And what happens is that we're trying to transfer some of those risks from a financial point of view, as Ms. Wallström was saying. Even though the main objective is to have concrete actions to mitigate the impact of those three, and a complementary strategy that the Mexican government has been using to mitigate the impact on, especially in public finance, has been using financial instruments to transfer risks. And if what we can see here now is precisely left to right, from beginning the occurrence, if we measure it as event occurrence from least greater frequency, so to less frequency, and then intensity up on the other axis. There is a fund that allows the government to manage the primary management of the risks, and then another one, a program of reinsurance, and another program to transfer some of these to the financial markets. And so efforts have been made, very important ones, for public investment with a focus on risk reduction. It is also considered that the financial management by transferring the risk to the markets has been efficient. And only, for instance, in last year, Mexico has implemented in the last few years, was activated, and Mexico received funding from the financial market. So this means complementary resources from the private sector, and that are complementary, so that when we have to enter into the processes of reconstruction, we don't have to deviate resources that are destined for other social programs or for other kinds of infrastructure or programs. So within this, be used. And this is what I have wanted to share with you this morning. Thank you.